milestones and big occasions. And I love a good party. Does anybody else love a good party? Yeah. Come on, I don't... Are any of you the life of a party? Gordon's like, yeah. And some of you are like, party can happen over there, I'll be over here. I like it that way. Well, I like a good party, and because there's usually so much excitement in the air. People are smiling and laughing, and there's often pretty good food and great people. It's the kind of energy that kind of lifts everybody up. And if you've ever had to plan a party, you know that it takes a lot of work. And to be honest, I feel like I am not always the best at planning a good party. You want to get everything just right? The worst thing is I feel, is to like run out of food, right? Have people complaining like, oh, this is all I get, or there's nothing left for me. You don't want to run out of food. You want everything to be just right. You want it to look great. You want to have maybe the best gifts and the perfect timing and the right people. And sometimes it feels like planning all of that just seems too much. Seems like it's beyond my capacity. And maybe you felt that too. But if the person is worth it, that typically doesn't stop you from trying your best. Because love will push you past your limits. It'll stretch your creativity, your energy, your budget sometimes, your schedule, and you'll still be glad to do it. Why? Because there's something about honoring someone you care deeply about. See, it's not just about the party, it's about the person. And when somebody is worth it, you give it your best. Now, Jesus was no stranger to celebrations. In fact, his first miracle was done at a wedding banquet. And a week before the first Easter, there was a dinner party with Jesus as the guest of honor. Talk about intimidating if you were the party planner. And we're going to read about this in John chapter 12. And while you might have been invited to a meal where you were the guest of honor, or hosted the meal, it is likely that the party that you went to was not then followed the next day by a big parade through the streets, with you as the guest of honor at the center. Does anybody experience that? No. Jesus, though, if you didn't know, was a pretty important person. Not too long after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, which we looked at last week, Jesus returned to that small town where word would have spread quickly. I mean, you can imagine if that happened today, how quickly it would spread through Deep River. Well, Bethany was most likely a smaller town than this, and word did spread quickly. And in a moment of celebration, during a meal and before the parade, something happens that would, let's be honest, it would make most of us feel pretty uncomfortable. And yet, in it, Jesus is honored. We're going to read what happened in that incredible celebration and continue on as the party continues into the streets. John chapter 12, verses 1 to 19. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took out a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. The next day, the great crowd that had come for the festival heard that Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem. They took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, "Hosanna!" which means save us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. Jesus found a young donkey and sat on it, as it is written, "Do not be afraid, daughter Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt." At first, his disciples did not understand all this. Only after Jesus was glorified did they realize that these things had been written about him and that these things had been done to him. Now the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. Many people, because they had heard that he had performed this sign, went out to meet him. So the Pharisees said to one another, "See, this is getting us nowhere. Look how the whole world has gone after him." What a celebration. What a time it would have been to be there. We hear word continuing to spread. And of course, if you had heard that somebody had raised somebody from the dead, your interest would be piqued. And word spreads and people go and they want to see Jesus, but they also want to see Lazarus, because if what's true, Lazarus is going to be alive, and wouldn't it be great to get his story? Now we see the Pharisees, they take a bit of a different approach. See, the Pharisees John refers to, they were a group among the Jewish people that were extremely focused on maintaining the Jewish laws and how they interpreted them. They had a degree of power among the people, and Jesus was threatening their understanding and their power, and they did not like what they were seeing and hearing. And we see that they might not have been the only ones. Judas, one of Jesus' disciples at the time, also objected to the way that Jesus was celebrated. And initially, if you hear those words, there might be a part of you that's like, yeah, Judas makes a good point. And yet, the truth would be revealed, and Judas was really just speaking from his own selfishness. Now, one of the best ways to try and kill a celebration is if you try to make it all about yourself when it's about somebody else. If you showed up at a big birthday party and everybody congratulations, like happy birthday, and you kind of try and raise your voice and be like, well, I turned 33 a few months ago. That would not make the party even better. And we see the Pharisees and Judas, their selfishness creeping in, trying to take over this celebration. And here's the truth of the matter. Your words and your actions show what you celebrate. Your words and your actions, they show what you celebrate. See, we see the disciples, we see people gathering around, excited about Jesus, and we see who's celebrating Jesus and who's not. Who's celebrating somebody else. Now, unlike Judas and the Pharisees, if your intent on celebrating, if your plan is to let's have a celebration, let's party, let's get excited, you probably already know how to celebrate well. You could probably think of a list of things that would make a great celebration. So let me ask you, what is one thing that would help make a great celebration? Food. Music. Anything else? Laughter. Anything else? Friends, family, people, yeah. These are amazing things that would help make an amazing celebration. Now we see Jesus' followers and others joining in, contributing to this celebration. And sometimes when you celebrate, not always, but sometimes, you might offer a gift. Right? And we see in this moment, as they're eating a meal with Jesus, the celebration is starting. Mary brings this extravagant gift. Incredibly expensive perfume that Judas says was about a year's wages, and washes Jesus' feet with it. It's interesting that in this moment when Judas's words seem to show that he cares about the poor, we read after and his actions prove otherwise. Whereas, let's be honest, we see Jesus' response to this gift. And it almost seems like Jesus doesn't care about the poor by how he answers. Jesus says, you will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. I wonder during this celebration if everybody's like, what do you mean, Jesus? Are you saying you don't care about them? And yet, when you look at Jesus' life and actions, he's constantly showing that he cares about those who are rejected, those who are outcasts, the poor. See, Jesus' actions show that by his words, he's absolutely not saying he does not care about the poor. So what could he mean by this? Was the gift so incredible that he just wanted to keep it all to himself? But we see that we've seen before that the value of a gift to Jesus is not based on monetary value. It's not based on how big it is. See, as a kid, you probably, maybe even now, not judging you, but I know as a kid, I'd look at the big present and be like, I hope that's for me. Hope the biggest one is for me. But you can read in the end of Mark chapter 14 about Jesus pointing out a widow who gave only a couple small coins to the temple treasury while there were rich people dumping in tons of money, and Jesus points at the widow and says she gave more than all the rest. See, Jesus wasn't about the price tag. See, the value of the gift was the heart behind it. What made Mary's gift so significant was the heart behind it. She knew that Jesus had proved that he indeed was the resurrection and the life. If anyone deserved it, Jesus was the only one worth giving all that she had. And she doesn't just present Jesus the gift. She almost stops the celebration by letting down her hair, an act that in today would be, or an act back then would be seen as a bit shameful. She lets down her hair and wipes his feet with her hair. Now today, you probably think that's kind of gross. And in that day, it was not just gross, it was degrading. Touching someone's feet was an act of humility. It was humiliating. Servants were meant to do that. And yet Mary does this to say that Jesus is worthy of honor. It's one of the biggest acts of celebration we see leading up to Jesus' death. See, while there was some truth in what Judas said, Mary realized, and Jesus confirmed it, that while this expensive gift could have helped some people, Jesus was truly the final solution. See, Jesus would one day, and this is my hope, and I hope it's your hope, Jesus will one day turn the world right. Until he returns, we are called to care for the poor and all those in need where we can. But Jesus one day will return and restore his creation. And he calls us to be a part of that right now. Jesus had become Mary's story. And she realized that he was worth celebrating. See, when Jesus becomes your story, you realize that he is worth any and every gift you could offer. If you've ever received an invitation to a big celebration, oftentimes you'll see a request that you RSVP, which is French for please reply. An acronym for the French that means please reply. In order to plan accordingly, it's good to know how many people are coming and if you're going to have enough of whatever you're planning, enough space, enough food, enough whatever, for the people that are planning on coming. But what you need to do, if you have to RSVP, you have to look at your calendar And you have to see, okay, do I have any plans that day? Do I have time to travel? And if you have plans, you then need to decide, are my plans more important than this event? Sometimes, the plans that are made, you can't get out of them for whatever reason. You know what? I can't come. But if the event, if the person being celebrated, or people, maybe if it's a wedding, is worth it, you will try and do whatever you can to make that a yes, that you will show up. You have to give your time, commit your time to say, I'm going to go. See, when you realize that somebody is worth celebrating, you commit to giving them your time. Time that could be spent relaxing, could be spent working, earning money, hanging out with somebody else, or doing whatever. But you decide that the best way to use that time is to celebrate that person. See, after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, how could Lazarus and his family not offer him their time? With all that Jesus had done, even people who hadn't seen Jesus yet knew that he was worthy of their time. Whatever plan people had, whatever schedules they were on, Jesus was worth scrapping everything. We got to see this guy. Celebrating him was more important. When Jesus becomes your story, you realize that he's worth all the time that you have. Now, when you go to a big event for someone important, typically the conversation revolves around that person. It's hard not to talk about that person. Next time you're invited to a wedding, try not to talk about the couple getting married. Okay, maybe don't do that. You might offend some people. But it's incredibly difficult not to talk about that person. And during that time, many people were traveling to Jerusalem that year, that time of year. See, the Passover was a big celebration and feast, and where the nation of people gathered together to remember what God had done for their ancestors, that God had freed them from slavery. He'd provided a miraculous way for a group of slaves to be set free even without a fight. See, if you could make it to Jerusalem for this, you would go. And so people were heading to Jerusalem with a plan in mind, with a focus on, this is Passover time, we're celebrating this, we're remembering this. Maybe there was that part of, we need this again because Rome was occupying the area, and the idea that we need to be set free again. But with all the people heading to Jerusalem, some who would have been well regarded, maybe even some famous people in that day, only Jesus gets a parade. John 12:13 says, they took palm branches and went out to meet him, shouting, Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the King of Israel. The crowds began to grow, and the word continues to spread. And we read, now the crowd that was with him when he called Lazarus from the tomb and raised him from the dead continued to spread the word. Many people, because they had heard what he had performed, because they had heard he had performed this sign, went out to meet him. whatever plans they had in mind, because of what they heard, they set it aside and they started talking about Jesus. Who is this guy? What's happening? It didn't matter what crazy Uncle Ned had done that morning. It didn't matter that finances were running low. It didn't matter that somebody had the fastest donkey in the Middle East. It didn't matter what was written in the Jerusalem Times or any other news. Jesus was worth announcing and talking about above everything else. See, I love talking about what's going on in our world and getting into some hot topics and having different opinions. And I enjoy reading and listening to the news to know what's happening. But what's better is knowing that no matter how boring or crazy our world gets, Jesus is really the only one worth talking about. See, they had real problems, real things to worry about, just like you do. And they set it all aside because Jesus was there. See, when Jesus becomes your story, He's worth talking about. Now, with all that was going on, if you were in Bethany, which was around 3 kilometers away from Jerusalem, or if you were in Jerusalem itself, you would be hard-pressed to avoid the fanfare. If you were traveling to Jerusalem for Passover, and you had never heard of this guy, Jesus, you would still be wondering, okay, what is going on? Who is this guy? What is this all about? Anytime I see balloons, and I saw it a bit this morning, the kids, like, what are these for? What are those for? Right? Anytime I see balloons outside of somebody's house, I mean, you could call me nosy, but I'm curious. Like, whose party? What's going on? Can I come? No. If you've ever been driving somewhere and streets have been blocked off, or there've been a crowd of people, you probably wondered, what's going on here? Maybe you've been annoyed with the disruption that the road you want to take is now blocked off. You would be curious, why are we celebrating? Who is this guy? See, for many of us, sometimes we just have to survive one more year and people will celebrate us. But people here weren't celebrating Jesus' birthday. We save that for December. They were celebrating Him because of all the things that He had done. See, Jesus had healed incurable people. Last week we looked at Lazarus, dead, 4 days. Not a problem for Jesus. Jesus had calmed a storm. Jesus had spoken with authority over evil spirits. Jesus had rewritten Lazarus' tombstone's expiry date. Jesus had fed thousands of people with barely any food. How could you not celebrate this man? In a time when enemy forces were occupying your homeland, how could you not want to hold on to Jesus, who gave you hope that no matter how bad things got, He could still do something about it? But see, more importantly than what Jesus had done, they were celebrating Jesus for who he was. Though people didn't fully realize it yet. The celebration was not just about what he had done, it was about who he was. See, all the things that Jesus was saying and doing, it was pointing people to realize that this was the long-awaited Messiah, which means the anointed one of God. It spoke of a king that would restore the nation. See, many people had their own ideas of what a Messiah would look like and would do. And so we see people are being split over Jesus has got to be it. Let's get excited. But then we see these other people that Jesus doesn't fit what they expected. Jesus didn't fit the Pharisees' definition of a Messiah. And they wanted to put an end to Jesus. And all these people, regardless of their idea of what a Messiah, a Savior, the next king should look like, there was this main understanding that the Messiah would reunite the exiles. He would restore the Jewish people, defeat all their enemies. And everything that Jesus was doing, the power that he had, people began to think, is this it? He must be. The Pharisees say, look how the whole world has gone after him. But here's the thing, Jesus wouldn't conform to any one person's idea of what the Messiah should be. Jesus absolutely had in mind the restoration of the Jewish people and the defeat of their enemy. But his sights were on the true problem. The evil behind not only corrupt nations, but the evil that has corrupted the Jewish people, that has corrupted you and I as well. See, Jesus was there to defeat not a group of people, but evil and the effects of sin itself. And in this moment, we see Jesus' disciples celebrating him, though not getting the full picture. But they would celebrate him even more in the years to come. Not because he defeated Rome, but because he would defeat death itself. He would rewrite the story in a way that only God could. And many millions more, as time went on, would find their true hope in Jesus as he changed their lives forever and would celebrate him. And the fact that you and I are here today, long past Rome and many other nations, points to the true fact that Jesus' kingdom is above all and will last beyond every other kingdom. Jesus is truly worth celebrating. Jesus' disciples would give their time. They would talk about Jesus, and they would give incredible, beautiful gifts as many of them laid down their lives, saying that Jesus was who he said he was, and he did raise from the dead. The celebration of Jesus continue and still continues. Ever since Jesus was born, people knew that he was worth celebrating because he was truly changing the world. So the question is, will you celebrate him? Will your life become a celebration of Jesus, of what he has done and what he's still doing? Will your life be a celebration of who Jesus is? Will what you have, the time that you have, the words that you have, join the ongoing celebration because you are invited to the party? In fact, that's part of the reason he did what he did. To extend you an invitation to join in the celebration as you realize more and more who Jesus is. And the most beautiful thing about it is even if you are the worst party planner ever, if you are the worst person at celebrating, if you hate big parties, if you're not good at planning them, Jesus remains more than good enough. See, whether you would have found yourself pouring expensive perfume on Jesus' feet, cheering as he entered Jerusalem, or maybe even on the opposite side, wishing that it all would end, Jesus still died. And he still rose to life and offered you a hope that only he could offer. See, whether you've celebrated Jesus all your life, or you've critiqued the festivities, or you didn't even realize there was a party, Jesus still welcomes you to join his kingdom, where death will be done away with and everything will one day be set right. See, even when our celebration seems like it's not good enough, and let's be honest, for someone as amazing as Jesus, it never will be. Even when it's not good enough, Jesus remains more than good enough. Music team can come back up. If you think you're not good enough, that's precisely the point. It's why I'm here. Because Jesus was the answer that you and I needed. Celebrating Jesus means celebrating God doing what we could never do. And if you think you're too good for Jesus, I'd love to see you do what he did. Jesus transformed people's lives. He transformed our world. His name is recognized around the world. And yet he never held political office. He never led military armies to victory. He was literally a nobody by most standards that humanity has set. And yet, he has been celebrated since he lived. And to this day, he is celebrated all over the world. Why? Because he was one with God and did what only God could do. See, when we recognize who he is, we realize that he is worth celebrating. He, not we, is the focus of our lives. And we welcome him to keep showing up, to keep doing amazing things. We invite him to continue to restore our lives and our world. Because that's what Jesus does. That's who he is. So let's sing together and let's celebrate together.